William Boyd, London Book Fair Author of the Day. Welcome to the London Book Fair podcast.
Thank you.
Now, you were one of the Granta Best of Young British Novelists way back when in 1983. Amos Barnes, Rushdie McEwen Swift, Ishiguro, Rose Tremaine, Pat Barker, not many women. A great accolade, but was it also a bit of a burden?
Well, I think the thing was we didn't realise at the time, this was the first of these promotions, finding a generation of writers, and I didn't know many of them at all, just by reputation. So I was living in Oxford at the time, so I came up for the famous photograph, and I don't think any of us realised particularly that we'd still be around 30 years later.
I mean, quite a few of the others have made lots of headlines. You've mostly kept out of them. Is that okay as far as you're concerned?
Well, I think, it's... I don't think writers want to be in the headlines, actually. I think it's an accident. Obviously, Sal Mann couldn't help it.
No.
But some writers are just, seem fascinating material for certain newspapers, whereas others are deeply boring. And the writer's life is kind of dull, actually.
You've won and been shortlisted for lots of awards. Do they still matter in our digital age?
I think they do, because they get people talking about books, basically, and they become, a topic of conversation and debate and controversy. But I don't think you should take them too seriously. They're part of the sideshow of the literary life, and I don't denigrate them. But winning one, or being shortlisted, or not winning, or not being shortlisted, really shouldn't be that important to you as a writer.
You've been shortlisted for the Booker, but you've never won it. Does it bother you every year whether you're on the shortlist or not?
No, I've got a very phlegmatic, philosophical attitude to prizes. If you win one or you're shortlisted, then it's a very nice thing to happen. But I certainly don't agonise over it, and I, in fact, don't expect now to be on any shortlists anymore. I've had my moment, and there are newer, younger writers coming up, and I think that my day, as far as prizes go, is over.
And it doesn't bother you, that's fine.
Doesn't bother me in the slightest.
You're cool about it, as they say.
Yes, I'm quite cool about it.
There's a lot of talk about the rise of self-publishing. You, of course, traditionally published, and I imagine you will remain happily traditionally published. But do you think self-publishing is a democratising trend, or do you just think it creates too much noise? Well,
I don't think there's anything one can do about it. I mean, people, the self-publishing explosion is a sign of people's hunger, if you like, to see their writing in some form of print. It's like the explosion of literary festivals. I mean, you go to one a week, every week of the year, or several a week. What does that? I mean, it shows us a real curiosity, a real need that can be met. But I don't think it's anything to worry about, because it seems to me that the people who are successful self-publishers then immediately want a proper publisher.
Yes.
It's maybe just another way into getting your book published in an orthodox way. I mean, very few successful self-published novelists, it seemed to me, continue on that road. They're nearly always snapped up by a proper publisher, who will then do the editing and the promotion and the marketing in a way that I think you just physically can't as a self-published writer. You
began writing in the early 80s when advances were smaller, but authors had a longer time to develop their craft. Writers are allowed much less time now. Are they allowed enough time to develop as writers?
Problem is that it is a job, it is a business as well as a vocation, and you have to pay the rent, and you have to earn a living. And I must say I've been very fortunate, and I've never ever had a multi-book contract. I never sell my books before I've written them. So I have written for 30 years under these conditions of total freedom, but I recognise that's unusual, and it is tricky for a writer to be under pressure, and perhaps that's why I've deliberately avoided it, because I haven't wanted that pressure of we're looking forward to receiving the manuscript pressure. I can take 10 years to write a novel in theory if I wanted to, so it is a pressure to be avoided if possible, but I wouldn't deplore it, because I recognise the demands of a working life.
Now, you're bringing Bond back to the 1960s. Did you think twice when you were asked to write a Bond novel?
No, I didn't think twice. I said yes instantly. It was a very good time for me, because I just finished my own last novel, Waiting for Sunrise, so I was I was busy, but I wasn't writing a novel of my own. But I had written Waiting for Sunrise is a spy novel, and I've written 2 spy novels, and I'm sort of steeped in that world. I also knew a lot about Ian Fleming. I put him as a character in one of my own novels.
Yes.
And so it was just one of these wonderful serendipitous moments, and I said, well, yes, please, thank you very much.
What's your favourite of the Bond novels? Casino Royale, maybe?
I think my favourite Bond is actually From Russia with Love, because it's like a real spy novel. You know, it's a honey trap, and it's about agents and Russia and the Cold War. And I think the Bond novels that get a bit, you know, extravagant and gimmicky are my least favourite. The ones that have their feet firmly on the ground are the ones I like best. In fact, I like the much maligned Man with the Golden Gun, the last posthumous Fleming novel as well, because that's a real mission, you know, go to Jamaica and assassinate this man. So these are the ones that I favour, because, you know, my own novel is a straightforward mission for our most famous spy. So those are the ones that I like best. And I think From Russia with Love is in many ways is Fleming's most interesting novel.
Do you think Bond became much less literary and therefore much less like the Fleming original?
Well, I think that the difficulty is the Bond novels, in a way, maintain their integrity, but everybody's impression of Bond is diluted by the movies, and it's the movies that have changed the perception of Bond. When you go back and look at Fleming's novels, you realise that most of them were published in the 1950s. And that's what makes them so extraordinary. And you have to think, what must have been like reading Goldfinger in 1956 or whenever it was published? It must have been quite extraordinary. So the literary Bond, I think, remains quite true to himself. It's the cinematic Bond that has been taken in all sorts of directions that I don't necessarily approve of. But then that's the movies, you know. So the literary Bond is quite a distinct and clear-cut creation, I think.
Of course, most people only know Bond from the films, really, don't they?
Yes, I think it's interesting when you say to people, I'm writing a new James Bond novel, they say, you know, will Daniel Craig be in it? And you say, it's a book, not a film. But you realise that the films have so dominate people's thinking about 007 that you have to kind of make the point, no, there was a literary Bond long before a celluloid one. And the literary Bond is a fascinating creation.
Can you tell us anything about what might happen to 007 in your novel? Well,
I'm going to be really annoying. I mean, I'll tell you what I sort of allowed myself to say, and that you know, Bond was born in 1924. So in 1969, which is when my novel is set, he's 45 years old. So he's a mature, not to say, you know, experienced man. He's not the limber young agent that you might think. Mind you, Daniel Craig is exactly that age now.
Yes.
So you can still be in very good shape.
Yes.
So it's an older and wiser Bond, necessarily, because I'm following on the chronology of Fleming's Bond. But it's a real spy on a real mission. I think that was what I said I wanted to do to the Fleming family.
Did you have fun doing it at the end of the day? Did you enjoy it?
I really enjoyed it. No, I really had great fun doing it. But I decided, and you know, I think this is true of all the writers, that you can't do it lightly or complacently or frivolously. You really have to take it seriously, which is why I reread all the books you know, with a pen in hand and taking notes, and steeped myself in Bond's world. And you know, I again, as I said, I know a lot about Fleming, and I knew a lot anyway about the Bond novels. But it was just an interesting re-education, and I took all that information and applied it to my own version.
Now, you're at the London Book Fair on the Monday. I imagine you've been before as an author.
I've been to the book fair twice before, I think. And I like it very much, because even though it's vast, and it's always daunting for an author to go to a book fair, whether it's Frankfurt or the American Book Exchange, is that what it's called?
Book Expo.
Book Expo, yeah. Which is a sort of terrifying experience as you walk through hangar after hangar of publishers. And something about the London Book Fair is quite author friendly, I think. So I've enjoyed my 2 visits to it in the past, and I'm looking forward to going there again.
Do you have any particular plans for your author day at the London Book Fair?
I think plans are being made for me. I think I'm giving all I know at the moment, I'm giving a talk, and I think the title of the Bond novel is going to be revealed at that moment. And then I think there is a Bond party or Bond drinks party that evening. But
At which martinis will be served?
Or yes, or some powerful drink, that's for sure. But otherwise, I think it's mainly centred around this interview conversation that I'm giving at the Pen Cafe or wherever it is.
Well, the eyes of the world will be on you as you reveal the title.
I know. I mean, it's funny. You idly, or not idly, but you enthusiastically say, "Yes, I'll write a Bond novel," and you realize shortly thereafter you're stepping into this global phenomenon that is James Bond and his image, and how it truly is global. You know, people are fascinated about it in Japan and Venezuela and Russia as much as they are in Aberdeen or St Ives. So it's quite an experience to suddenly be part of that for a short while.
William Boyd, thank you very much indeed.